Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Before we jump in today, we'd like to let you know about our AgEmerge Summer Summit. Mark your calendar for August 4th and 5th. Come see Monte in person and experience soil health and regenerative agriculture in action on the Bottens family farm in Cambridge, Illinois. From the basics to the wild side, get your questions answered and engage in thought-provoking discussion as we share years of experience in a full transparency farm tour. Oh, and we can't be all work and no play. So to wrap up the event, we'll spend a fun evening together in the pasture to enjoy dinner and live music at the 4th annual Concert with the Cows, hosted by Grateful Grays. So save the date, and to get more information about the event on our website, visit www.asn.farm. And now, on to our show. Thanks for joining us. Today we welcome Brad Schmidt, manager of Agronomy at Regeneration Nation. We've had the pleasure of knowing Brad for several years, and he was one of the speakers at our first AgEmerge event back in 2019. Brad has a passion not only for soil health, but for bringing together people to share their regenerative management experiences with each other. Brad had the opportunity to work and learn under Dr. Dwayne Beck at the Dakota Lakes Research Farm, where he saw and experienced firsthand how these practices worked in some of the toughest soils. So listen in as Monte and Brad discuss the power of producer-based research, diversifying your operation, and why other companies are so interested in these practices and working with growers to build soil health.
Welcome to this episode of the AgEmerge podcast. I'm really excited to have Brad Schmidt with us today. Some of you may remember Brad presented at our very first AgEmerge conference in Monterey, California, and we're excited to have him on here. Welcome, Brad.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, that's great. And tell us your story and give people a little background, who you are, where you're from, where you live, and those kind of things. Bring people up to speed.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been a couple of years, Monty, since we've been in touch and everything. But yeah, a lot of stuff has changed in the time since we talked last. But so I'm originally from southwestern Minnesota, Tracy, Minnesota area, if anybody's familiar with that. Grew up around there and family farms there, and then went to college at SDSU in Brookings, South Dakota, and got my degree in agricultural science there. So pretty diverse degree, I guess, in the sense of got a lot of different things underneath the belt. And then worked for Dwayne Beck at Dakota Lakes Research Farm when I was in college there. And that's where I first learned about no-till and all that kind of stuff. And that just bred into the entire career that I have so far. I've been very lucky to meet all sorts of different people from all over the world. And yeah, I always tell everybody I don't understand how I got to where I am, because I just got a very, very lucky career so far. And then after I worked for Dwayne, when I graduated college, I worked at Cronin Farms in Gettysburg, South Dakota, under Dan Forgy, and then left there and then went and worked for Ducks Unlimited for 3 years as their head agronomist for the U.S. and helped found and build their soil health program that's pretty nationally recognized now on that. And then at the end of my tenure with DU, I started this company I work for now, Regeneration Nation, and we're a biological company just based on trying to bring more value back to producers and farmers, and trying to help bridge that gap of trying new things and just keep getting guys more profitable and everything. So yeah.
Well, it's an interesting journey. Yeah, you got to work with a couple of the heavy hitters early on there. So, we have to say the Dwayne Beck
Yeah.
on this, not just Dwayne Beck or the Dr. Dwayne Beck. Now, Dwayne's retired now. Did you make it to his retirement party by chance?
I was in Billings, Montana when his retirement party was going on, so I missed it. But yeah, he'll be around for a couple years yet. So Sam Ireland is the new guy taking over for Dwayne there. So he's young, and I think he'll do a fantastic job at Dakota Lakes and really help take Dakota Lakes to the next level. And he'll be a good step in for Dwayne, because those are big shoes to fill, and trying to find somebody that can, have the quote unquote common sense of farmers and ranchers, but as well have that knowledge of working in, a very heavy science research based type system is a hard person to find. So.
Yeah, that's true. I can imagine, Dwayne Beck does a lot of things really well. It's just hard to imagine him doing retirement well. So
yeah.
We're going to have to really corral him and make sure he's got plenty of air in his bike tires and send him on his way. He needs something to keep him busy. That's for sure. But no, he's a legend in the no-till world, and in the regenerative ag world now, we is the term du jour, and he's really done some amazing things, especially for the dry land and irrigated West. So it's a pleasure to know him and the impact he's made on millions upon millions of acres. So
yes.
Tell us this. What was it like working for him? So we've all got to see him on stage, and we remember in his earlier days, he was a little more edgy than in the last 10 years or so, but he wasn't afraid to tell it the way it is. And you knew what you were getting with Dwayne. That was a beautiful part about him.
Yeah.
So what was it like working with him on a daily basis when you're there at Dakota Lakes Research Farm?
He's the same as you see on stage.
He's the real thing, isn't he?
He's the real thing. Yeah. There's no change in it whatsoever. So yeah, he's the exact same.
Don't you think one of his keys to success was he wasn't afraid to try something, and he wasn't afraid to fail big at something too?
Oh yeah. Fair? Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. And that's the beauty of research, in that spot. He had that capability to really push the envelope, and with Dakota Lakes being a producer-led organization with affiliation with the university, I mean, you really get the producers' minds on that board to really see what the producers want to see, and you do producer-based research, and that's what I think separates Dakota Lakes from any type of research at a university that they could do, because it's really farmer-led. So.
And, the partnership with South Dakota State, at least probably sponsored a large part of all of maybe Dwayne's salary, right? But the operations of that farm still had to pay for the farm itself. I mean, it wasn't a free ride from the university. So I think that's another unique
correct
to that public-private partnership.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. It's a one-of-a-kind place. It really is.
I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't a one of a kind. We've discussed it in California and some other areas. I'd love to see a producer led, because you're looking at systems and how to do things better. And I think that's a unique part to it.
Right.
Now, what do you think is some of the biggest things you learned being there?
Oh, well, I came from Southwest Minnesota, and going out to Pierre, that's a
plow.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you don't moldboard plow at least once a year, if not twice, you are not cool.
Yeah. And that's what I grew up on. I mean, that was the first thing I learned how to do was plow, because it's pretty easy to put a kid or a teenager in a plow and just put your tire in the furrow and pull away, And so when I had first even heard about cover crops or anything like that, I mean, the first video I think I ever watched was something on Gabe Brown. And this was 10 years ago, probably. So the amount of information out there then is not even near to what it is now. And I had emailed Gabe at the time, just thinking it was a long shot to see who because I really didn't want to go into sales necessarily at the time. And that's really what you had to do, is either go into work for a co-op, because there wasn't the cover crop stuff, and the regenerative ag space wasn't then what it is now. And so the opportunities were pretty small at that point in time. And he told me to contact Dwayne, and that's how I got in touch with him. So it was just an eye-opening experience to go from a place where everything is turned black every single year to a place where they don't till the soil ever, and seeing how water infiltration works and soil structure works, and how microbes work in the system, how crop rotation and cover crops and grazing, and how all of that stuff, and how nature really functions, and being able to see that. And I was like, well, shoot, if they can make it work out here where annual rainfalls are 12 inches a year, maybe, on soil that is not very good. And all of a sudden you got 6 inches of soil, and then you got shale rock and highly glaciated areas. I was like, if you can make it work here, I don't see why you can't make it work in the best soils in the world, from southern Minnesota into Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. And so that was my eye-opening experience, I guess.
Well, it was certainly whiplash.
Oh yeah.
Or mind lash, if you will.
Yes.
Well, fantastic. And then from there, you said you went on up the street to, just next door, Dan Forgy, right?
Yep.
Just South Dakota style.
Right. Yep.
Dan's been a pioneer and really implemented a lot of things. Is he on the board at SDSU or at Dakota Lakes?
I don't know if Danny's on the board anymore.
He's a follower,
but he's absolutely.
He put it in practice at scale. I visited his farm.
Correct. Good
guy and lots of cover crop knowledge and those kind of things. So you went from the research side to the putting it practical in use, which is Dwayne's was an eye-opening experience, but going there was even more, because it's a large operation with things in place. And again, coming from Southwest Minnesota, where, a farmer could have 2,000 acres and they got 2 or 3 4-wheel drive tractors and, 4 implements, 2 combines, and then all this stuff. And then I go out there and they're on 12,000 acres on 12 different crops, one seeder, right?
One 16-row planter at the time when I was there, now I think they have a bigger planter now, but either way, 1 planter, 1 air seeder, 1 drill, 1 4-wheel drive tractor, 2 combines,
for just not needed. Dakota, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So it was amazing to see that scale of an operation with the minute amounts of equipment. And that was just a huge thing too, for me to understand, like, wow, you really don't, trying to be profitable is not just in what you're raising your inputs as far as, crops per year, but it's also what you have around for equipment and everything. So it was very, very interesting.
I heard Brian Jorgensen talk 20, 25 years ago about a similar style model, and they're not very far away from Dan either. But, when you go to various crops that have various times a year that you plant and harvest them, you do a much better job of asset utilization of your equipment. So you're always planting something, always harvesting something, because, everybody complains about, well, I've got this $250,000 planter for 4 weeks out of the year, and I got $1 million combine and heads for, 6 weeks out of the year. Well, you don't have to accept that. You can look at different areas, different rotations to maximize that. And really, that's what you're saying Dan did, is he was maximizing return on assets essentially with his equipment and his
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and they do the same exact thing at JLC. Yep, where for at Jorgensen Land and Cattle there. Yep, same type of deal, and they have a phenomenal operation as well. So that whole central part of South Dakota is innovative. Yes, and absolutely.
I think it's something to be, when you're on the edge of those kind of brittle environments, right? So you have less rainfall and poorer soil types. You have to be innovative to stay with it. A lot of us that have been blessed with these amazing soils do things that aren't optimum because you can do it and get away with it. Where, in the more fringe type farming, marginal situations, it's the difference between, making money and going broke.
Right. Well, and that's what Gabe, and folks that understanding ag all the time, everybody's got their unfair advantage, right? So, I mean, that's that whole thing right there. So,
yeah. And I think there's probably some competitive advantages in those dry land environments to where you come in with a better system. The land costs are 1/4 of what they are in the heart of the Corn Belt, and you can do some good things, but it's higher risk, so
Yep.
higher risk and requires better management.
We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now back to our show.
So talk to us a little bit about after that, you went with DU, Ducks Unlimited, and they're kind of closely aligned, I think, also with Pheasants Forever and a lot of the similar things. But why is an environmental organization, or a conservation organization interested in what farmers do? I mean, it sounds like they're trying to get us or something, right? Beware of those environmental groups.
Right.
But no, talk to us about that. And it's another public-private partnership opportunity for many farmers throughout the country, really, in byways everywhere. But you were in South Dakota, but you're aware of kind of the whole national strategy.
Yep.
Why are they interested in working together with farmers?
Well, I mean, there's always been that gap with those nonprofit organizations and producers, because like you said, it's that, what are they trying to get out of me, or what's the gotcha thing? Like there's that little thing written in the fine print that, we're not seeing. And when I came in and my manager at the time, Steve Donovan, was very on board with trying to do something different to work with producers more, because primarily in the prairie pothole region where I was in, South Dakota, North Dakota, up into Canada and everything, was a lot of those, which is the duck habitat of the world. I mean, that's where almost all of the ducks are born and raised is in this area. Well, the work that they had to do was primarily on private land. Well, if you have and who's the biggest private landowners in those states? It's farmers and ranchers. And if you don't have a good relationship with farmers and ranchers, how are you supposed to get your work done? And that's where a lot of that fundraising money in that organization went to, is that area. And so that's why we started the whole soil health program, was to try to bridge that gap with farmers and ranchers, so that not only were we going to help them become more profitable in their farming operations by trying something different and helping to bridge those gaps of cost sharing on different practices of cover cropping, no-till, rotational grazing, et cetera, et cetera. But then we could also accomplish our conservation efforts in, repairing wetlands and all that kind of stuff. So ultimately that was their goal, and, they're still going at it yet, so they still have a team, that's heavily involved to trying to continue to do that. And when I was there, I mean, I traveled all over the U.S. Working with different corporations and different businesses, trying to and producers trying to figure out how we could all best work together, because ultimately we're all out there in the landscape and we all have to kind of work together in order to accomplish our goals. And you can't do one thing by yourself and expect to go a long ways without partnerships. And that's true with anything. You have to have people around you that have their strengths to keep you going. And that's what ultimately, that was our goal. And like I said, they're still going yet. So,
well, it's kind of the rule of real estate, location, location, location. And
absolutely,
what you're trying to do with any piece of real estate is optimize the revenue you can generate, whatever it's by square foot or by acre, or by section. And I think it's a unique opportunity to look at those marginal areas. For example, in the prairie pothole region, we've got depressions where water just doesn't run off to a stream. It's a basin type of thing, and the water runs to these potholes and accumulates. I'm just describing this for people out west. There's something called rain. You don't see it very often, right? It comes down from the sky in these things called drops. And no, I'm joking, but unfortunately, the western droughts, it's just persistent and rather terrible. But in this area of the country, the water would accumulate in these depressions, and we think we could raise a crop, right? They'd plant through them, till through them, and it'd get drowned out, and weeds would come, and it wasn't good for duck habitat, wasn't good for farmer profitability. So you're identifying those areas that were poor profitability but have an opportunity for duck habitat, and it's like, okay, don't plant these areas, right? Save the money of planting it. We're actually going to pay you to not do that. So we're going to pay you to not lose money. So that's making money twice, right? And at the same time, the ecosystem and ducks, along with other things, insects, pollinators, I'm sure many other things are going to benefit from that. So I think we really need to, as farmers, look at our stewardship, that we've really been told we're land stewards and we need to take care of creation, and think of where are those areas where we can do some targeted things. And just a small amount makes a big difference, doesn't it, Brad? I mean, a small change. What kind of impact did that have if a farmer would take, maybe 5% of their acres, or what percentage would it be, and how much of an impact would that have, Brad?
Oh, it was different, right? On different areas, but I mean, some fields, if anybody wants to Google prairie potholes, I mean, some of the images that'll pop up are extensive amounts of water in, a quarter section. I mean, some would have 10 or 15 basically little ponds or more in just 160 acres. So it's significant in a way. And depending on the practices put in place, like if we're using extensive amounts of tillage, as anybody knows, the infiltration rates go down. Well, now that what used to be prairie grasses that infiltrated water, and then whatever after soil profile was full, that's what would fill up wetlands. And when you're doing extensive amounts of tillage, you're not infiltrating anything. And now those wetlands are doubling, if not tripling in size sometimes. And now you're losing more land mass because you were tilling the soil. And so once we got guys to stop doing the tillage part and being able to infiltrate more water and hold more water in their soils and fill up their entire soil profile, we were starting to lower the amounts of water being collected in those prairie potholes. And then that also helped with, saline problems, because that's huge in the Dakotas. There's millions and millions of acres under saline seeps. And, if you want to learn more about that, just watch some of Dr. Beck's stuff on saline seeps and why they occur. But, so yeah, I mean, it was huge, and guys were and cattle's a huge thing too. And so if you could plant something around those areas or in those wetlands and get that the livestock out there to get at least some type of revenue off of those areas that you weren't getting before in a cropping system. So yeah, there was all sorts of different ways that people were experimenting on things. Just depends on the operation. So
because at the end of the day, wealth is created by optimizing revenue you're generating per acre, and that comes from great management. So it don't always have to be a grain crop that you're selling somewhere. It can be, like you said, cattle that you're grazing, habitat creation, and better water cycle use is going to improve the acres that are in grain production. So No, I want to move on just a little bit to family farm updates. So, being around Dwayne and Dan, you had drank enough of the Kool-Aid and started doing some livestock integration at your own family farm. And you talked to us a little bit 4 years ago now when we were in Monterey. give us a little update. What's going on at the family farm?
Still doing all the same stuff, but just trying to do a little more innovation. And we started our direct marketing business probably close to around that time when I was first out there. So now we're 4 years into that, and we have our regeneratively raised cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, turkeys, and then now we're working with some other producers that have goats as well, just to diversify the products that we have more to be able to bring to consumers. And so that business is continuing to grow, and it goes through all the same growing pains that every other business goes through, especially the last couple of years have been pretty insane with COVID and everything, and how our food system is pretty broken. And so it's been very good. It's been a very good learning experience for us on that end of things. And so everything's going very well though.
So in your area, Southwest Minnesota, where your family farm's at, you're not 20 minutes away from Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or Houston, something like that.
I wish.
Your big population base is what? Sioux City, Iowa, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's your probably 2 largest neighbors.
Yeah, Sioux Falls is about an hour and a half from the farm, and then the Twin Cities are about 2.5, 3 hours from the farm. Primarily, a lot of our stuff, we go up to the Twin Cities. That's our primary customer base. And that's the hard. I mean, I think that's the hardest part that people have to kind of realize and think about when they want to start direct marketing stuff. Is I think that's something that we should probably talk about more. Is yes, you're going to capture more of the dollar that you weren't getting before. But at the same point,
more of the dollar
you're gonna spend a lot more. It's a lot more time, and I think that's one thing with diversity. Is yes, it's good to diversify yourself, but if you're diversifying and putting more workload on your plate, now whatever you were doing really good at before, now you're doing half as good or a quarter as good. So it's a matter of trying to figure out your business plan and how you're gonna execute that diversity. And so it's not easy, and especially in rural communities that you're a long ways from those hubs of large amounts of people that don't raise their own stuff. I mean, in these rural communities, it's hard to find somebody that doesn't know someone that raises beef or pigs or something like that, where they can get it for a fairly decent price, and it's going to be better than anything you buy in the store. Still, it may not be necessarily like what some would say is like the best raised or whatever, but it's still, the quality is better, because anytime it goes through a huge processing facility, you could send the best stuff there. You can send our stuff that we raise or that you guys raise to Monte through those processing facilities, and I think some way, shape, or form they'd mess it up and they'd come out tasting pretty bad. So yeah,
there's a lot of shortcuts in the processing chain too, as far as we're doing dry aging, which you absorb more shrink, 4 to 8% shrink versus wet aging, which is 1%. But honestly, I like the taste.
Yep. Yeah.
If a person's doing a premium product, you got to do a premium process.
Yep.
And on the other hand, I think something that's interesting is the whole market. And I've talked to a few people in the last few days about this, but the whole market revolves around fresh. Fresh is best. And a small scale farmer, we can't plan it to where we're, killing animals every day and cutting them every day and delivering them every day. That just is not capable of small scale. But on the other hand, fresh meat in the meat case is anywhere from 7 to 14 days old prior to being purchased, just because the time it takes to get there and get distributed and those kind of things. So, thing I like about, I imagine you're frozen in your product, right?
Yep.
So once that cow comes, or the side comes off the rail and cut into steaks, within 24 hours, it's frozen.
Yes.
And then the next time that it's thawed is when the consumer goes to eat it. So, I mean, the most time it's exposed is 24 hours. And so it's not got microbial or enzymatic degradation for just that short period of time. So, people look at me a little weird, but frozen is actually fresher. And
yeah, well, and it's like and you still have to deal with regulations. I mean, USDA is 100% involved, in your states, depending on what state you're in, on what you can and can't do, and how much you can and can't sell with fresh and all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of the same way too. I'm a hunter as well. So when I go deer hunting, I have 100% tried something right after have killed the animal. We've cut off back straps and threw them on the grill right away. And it's chewy because the muscle breakdown, the animal doesn't go through rigor, and it doesn't go through that whole process of protein structure breakdown and everything. So you 100% know when you're eating something that's fresh versus something that's been able to age and have that whole protein breakdown and muscle breakdown to be able to something that you're not chewing on for 20 minutes. I like my steak, but I don't want to chew on a bite for 20 minutes.
Exactly. And I think, one of the other things that you said early on there is we got into this because, there's more money in it and those kind of things. But, there's two problems that you brought up, and that's you're not making all that money. There's a lot of money spent to market and your time to do that thing. And Will Harris was on the podcast here a few episodes ago, and he said, and I can't mimic his Southern drawl, but it makes you sound much more wise when you talk like Will Harris does. And he says, you don't get into this business because you're looking to make millions. It's tough. That's a higher price product, and those margins look good, but you don't do this because you're doing it to make a lot of money. And
right.
I think a lot of times that gets shortcutted a little bit when you look at, some people, well, here's how much profit per acre you can make on this and this. And it's like, yeah, but you got a lot of overhead to
100%. Yeah. Cause you're taking that whole chain from when you bring it to said, sale barn, and you sell it to said buyer, and that whole process in order to get it to somebody's plate, you're taking that entire process and now it's you. Yeah. And you have to figure out how to manage all that. And it's not simple, especially in the day of web stuff. It's not, you don't have storefronts, you have websites, and now you're talking about HTML and coding and all that fun stuff. And I don't speak hieroglyphics, and that's what coding is to me. So I pulled it up, and I started to get into it one day, and I was like, you know what? There's other people out there smarter than I am that can figure this out. I think I'll just talk to them.
There you go.
So, yeah.
And I think, it's the tremendous economics of scale of the current industry is impressive. I mean, they've done amazing efficiencies.
Yes.
The problem that the diversity also brings is, the jack of all trades, master of none. Right. So I think that's a couple things that have to be overcome. And I'm excited about, I think ag technologies can allow us to be a master at a smaller scale, because there'll be more intuitive, shared knowledge base that can help us make better management decisions to help overcome that, jack of all trades, master of none concept. So,
yes.
And I also think identity preservation and new style logistics is going to help us overcome that added costs that we have currently of poor, logistics and supply chain economics of scale. So stay tuned. I think that'll get slowly better over time and allow small to be better.
Yeah.
But, it'll take a while.
That's what I like about, I follow, his name is Grant Cardone. If you ever heard of Grant before, but he talks about like your cell phone, right? Like, it's not perfect at all by any means. And that's why they have software updates.
It's a little better all the time.
It's a little better all the time. You're continually trying to progress, and there's nothing in this world that's perfect. And I mean, that's one thing that I had to, I would say that's why I've kind of stepped off the radar per se in the ways of like really being out there and in front of people and stuff 4 years ago, like like I was, I had to kind of step back and really think about the whole processes of everything and be like, okay, there's nothing out there that's perfect in any way, shape, or form. Everybody's got some type of skeleton in the closet somewhere. It's just a matter of, trying to understand how things work and operate and everything. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that 4 years ago when you're more on the speaking circuit and such. You joined us in AgEmerge in Monterey. Great time. You shared about, your family farm and what you were doing there and those kind of things. But you snuck in something a little extra in your California trip after the AgEmerge conference, I believe. It was either after or before. I think it was after.
It was after, yep.
You went south to the LA area. And what did you do?
I proposed to my beautiful wife down there. Yep.
So almost an AgEmerge engagement, but not quite. But
it was close. It was close.
I didn't do a spot to where made it easier to happen.
Yep. Exactly. So I had to keep it a surprise. So
there you go. And then you also just celebrated a birth of is this your first child or?
First one. Yep.
Oh, very good.
Yep.
Well, congratulations on all of that. So
thank you.
What's going to happen out of making a trip to an innovative conference? You started. It's no, really happy for you. That's
thank you.
Great news. So
yeah, thank you.
Well, tell us about Regeneration Nation. What's that all about? What are you up to? What's the latest brainchild here?
Well, so, I mean, through all my work with DU and just being involved with the regenerative space and meeting everybody and working with producers all over the place, I just felt like there was a gap, right? And like, I never wanted to necessarily get into sales, but it was also because I never really understood what sales necessarily meant. I think sales has a bad connotation through a lot of folks. Like, I don't want to get bothered by the salesman, or I don't want to talk to the salesman. But at the same point in time, like, everything we do on a daily basis is based around sales. I had to sell my wife on me as a person, You
are a good salesman, I tell you.
I outkicked my coverage, like I think like most of us do. But everything you do on a daily basis is based around sales. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, sales isn't necessarily about pestering somebody or anything. It's like, how much value can I bring to somebody in exchange for other forms of value? It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, but it's all about value. And once I learned and realized everything in life is about bringing value to others, that's when everything changed for me. And so I started Regeneration Nation based on that. I want to bring more value to people, and there's more value that could be brought to producers. And so that's why I started the biologicals side of things, because I felt like it was that step to help bridge that gap of uncertainty going down the regenerative route, right? I mean, everybody's trying to find that like, okay, how am I going to battle this yield loss that I'm going to, this perception of yield loss I'm going to have as soon as I start going down this route, and how do I build up my biological activity, and how do I diversify my crop rotations, and how do I do all this stuff? And that's what I wanted to do. And so that's how this all got started. And so now we have and we're just a biological company. That's all we do. We have no seed. We have nothing like that, which sometimes can be difficult, and we don't have a consulting side of things. I share my knowledge with people that want it. And that's kind of what we do. And so it's difficult when you battle consultants that people hire on their operations, because for some reason most producers now we've hired somebody to make our decisions for us rather than being our own decision makers, and which when that person isn't necessarily the one out on the land day to day, it's your land, it's your business, and hiring somebody else that's not necessarily involved as deep as you are to make your decisions for you is difficult, and that's why you want to make sure that value that is exchanged. I'm not saying everybody's bad, but just making sure that value that's getting reciprocated to you is what you're actually looking for. And then,
and I think sometimes the consultants feel the role of a gatekeeper in order to be of value to their farmer client. So, but unfortunately at that same time, they're also doing things that can potentially not allow a farmer to try something new, do something new, move to the next step. So there's a balancing act, that you do need an information source, but you do have to not just give them carte blanche control of everything. So
correct.
Yeah, it's a challenge in the way the ag community is structured. Essentially, you're selling a product to pay for you. To pay for your brain, right?
Yep. Exactly.
It's the way the ag community works right now, and it's kind of sad because the value's in you, not necessarily in the product. But
correct.
Sell a product, pay for you. How do you decouple that?
Oh, I'm not the normal salesman, I guess, because I don't care if somebody buys a product from me. I just flat out with that right away. I'm not necessarily, do I sell product? Would I be super happy if you bought something 100%, but my interest is in making you better at what you're doing. So if you're looking for an expert in a super intense grazing scenario and you live in the desert, well, I have zero experience there, and I'm not going to try to act like I do, but I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to meet those types of people that are experts in that field, and I'll be more than willing to connect you with that person. So for me, I like to try to connect people to what their entire goals that they want to accomplish are, rather than trying to shove something down somebody's throat that they don't want, and you get told no a lot on the biological side of things because of the whole snake oil stuff that came around in the 80s and everything, but which is fine. There's people have bad experiences with certain things, but I think we all learn from our bad experiences, and it's not saying that you can't ever try something again, but how can you look at things in a different light? And so I just try to bring that different light to people in what I do. So,
but don't you think biologicals are cool now? I mean, ever since we hit the $7 corn in the previous cycle, they everybody came out of the woodwork, it seemed like, and now it's in the magazines all the time. And I think we really shifted from a snake oil to, you ought to just try this. It's only a couple bushel. That's my favorite thing. I think there's wider acceptance, right? But there's just more.
Well, everybody's got a product.
An additive approach instead of a system approach, I guess.
Right. And everybody's got a product. Somebody's got a product somewhere. Every big corporation's got one because they don't want to miss out on, a few more sales to their bottom line. So, I mean, I'm not against anybody else's product either. I'm sure their stuff works just fine, and a lot of this stuff should be probably used in symbiosis together versus separate. And I guess my whole goal is to make guys more profitable. So how can we look at the entire operation and not necessarily, for example, this year, fertilizer prices, they're astronomical. I just talked to a guy yesterday out in Wyoming that he got quoted at $2,000 a ton for urea. That's insane. So those guys out west they're not getting any rain. So you can't do anything. Water's the most limiting nutrient you have. So if you don't get any rain, doesn't matter how great you are or how fantastic the management is. If you don't get any rain at all, you're not going to get anything. And so trying to cut back on what people are using for fertility and synthetic fertilizers, and just trying to go down that more natural route and really help widen profit margins is my whole goal. You could add it on top of everything that you currently do, and you're right, get a few more bushels, but is that really helping you out long term? How can we look at it as an entire scope and really start to cut back on other things? And how can we cut back on is creating healthier, stronger plants, helping in drought resistance and drought scenarios, rather than having a drought resistant variety and paying more for that? What about this biological that helps in drought resistance? And saline, helping with just making a healthier plant so you have less disease pressure, less insect pressure, as well as harvesting the nutrients from the atmosphere and in the soil. So I look at it from a whole system, I guess, is my whole deal.
So you mean to tell me the ag retailer that owns the fertilizer mine and all the rail cars and logistics and the fertilizer shed and everything, and their whole business model is based on tons of throughput, is maybe not necessarily interested in you adding a biological and reducing the other fertilizer?
I don't know about that.
But wait a minute. They sell the biological, right?
Yeah.
But you got to keep using everything, and maybe, just a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why
some is good. More is
better.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's only been that way since fertilizer was introduced after World War II. Right. So,
Yep.
But I think there's something to be said about, if you're getting your biological components from a big retailer, so, a Nutrient, a Simplot, Helena, all the big boys, Wilbur Ellis, they all have extraordinary invested interests in traditional fertilizer products. So to get a recommendation to reduce their main line because they're adding a biological just probably won't align a whole lot, right?
Not necessarily. No, not unless they're wanting to completely axe all the rest of their business. And that's why we're not going to be involved with any of that, because that's not our goal. Our goal is to help producers, because I'm also come from the producer side, very close with it. And, I'm not actively necessarily involved on the farming operations day to day. But, I'm directly right there. I have the conversations every single day with my family. So I have that whole thing of like, I'm sick of farmers and ranchers just getting screwed over, and to me, it's time for people to start working together again, like they used to, rather than this whole back and forth. Like, I'm not going to talk to my neighbor about things, and I'm not going to help my neighbor unless they are like, absolutely, they had some type of injury or something like that. And, then we'll help our neighbor. But other than that, they're competition. It shouldn't be competition. It should be, how can we re-grab a part of the marketplace that other people that aren't necessarily involved with ag or understand the whole processes and understand the lifestyle and understand the work and understand everything that goes into it, make the decisions for us. We need to have a bigger seat at the table.
Oh, when one company controls 60% of the market and is interested in moving to 2/3 in the next 5 years or so, and that'll be done by acquisition and those kind of things, that's a problem. You get limited choices for farmers and limited leadership. So it's a challenge for the future of agriculture.
Yes.
Well, what else is on your radar in the future, Brad? Other than, baby number 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 6. What else do you find interesting happening in agriculture or in your world as here today?
That's a good question. Actually, it's funny because people will ask me like what ag podcasts do you listen to, or like what shows do you watch, or whatever. And to be honest, in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's nothing against anybody's ag podcast or anything like that, or books or whatever, but I've separated myself from it and dove down into more business side of things and really trying to study more people involved with different types of businesses, all the way from real estate to marketing and all that kind of thing, because it's all intertwined in agriculture. It's just a part that nobody ever talks about. We talk about what happens day-to-day operations and how do I get my plants to grow, but that's the basis of it. There's everything
Farmers
else.
like to farm, right?
Correct.
And yeah, the business end of it is weak. I mean, I agree with you. The whole soil health movement, regenerative movement is just it's all rainbows and unicorns, right? And
Yeah,
that's great, and that's the way we need to have. But how do we monetize it? How do we make something of it? And
right. And
we share that same frustration.
yeah, and I had. Because it seems like once you get the regenerative bug in you, right? Like you want to tell the world about it, and that's what you want to do, and that's what I was for so long, right away. But rather than trying to, it frustrates me like crazy when I drive up and down the road and see dirt just filled in the ditches. It drives me insane. But now I try not to let it get to me as much and try to understand why it's happening in the first place and what's the mindset behind all of that. And because, I mean, I don't know, you're going to have haters in everything you do. And to be honest, haters are good because they talk about you. But at the same point in time too, you can't let them take up your whole mind space. And that's what I used to do too, is I would sit on, Twitter or Facebook for, hours responding to people and you'd be like, that's not right. But it just takes up too much of your bandwidth,
I think what you're getting to is that you can talk about it forever, but if you don't do something or take action on it, what good does it do?
Correct.
That's what we've always been focused on, is we're trying to bring together on this podcast and in this communication effort we're trying to bring together innovator as far as the Dwayne Becks of the world and the other researchers and thought leaders that are out there, along with ag technologists, people that are providing product, services, and advanced technologies to make things happen with innovative farmers to solve this problem, to make a large scale movement towards regenerative agriculture. It's easily adopted at the homestead and the farmstead scale, but to help a conventional farmer, that's 2,000 to 20,000 acres make this change, it requires extra fortitude, support, and services to make it happen within their own context. And I'm with you. There's a lot of talk, okay, but it's time for action.
Right. Yeah, and you got to take massive action.
Yeah.
It takes that massive action, and I'm an opportunist rather than a pessimist. So like I really see opportunity in things, and I don't want to miss out on opportunities. But and that's what I said this before too, is like when you go through a hard time, it's not a matter of giving up on that one thing, but like learning from that experience and being like, okay, how can I go back to it and change it? And that's what I've been immersing myself in, is just trying to study all these extremely successful people and how they got to where they were. Not necessarily what they do, but like what's the principles behind everything that they do and how they've done it, and try to see the symmetries with that in everything that we go through in agriculture, and try to bring that to this field is kind of what I do. So I'm very involved with ag on a day-to-day basis, but I don't necessarily dive down deep into all the stuff. If I have questions, with everybody that's immersed in the stuff, I just call the people that are immersed in the stuff and ask them the questions. So,
well, very good. Any other thoughts or things we should have asked while we were together here today?
I don't know. I just appreciate you having me on and everything. It's been fun to catch up, and yeah, we have some big things in the works with Regeneration Nation coming up here in the next couple of years. I'd love to talk about it right now, but it's one of those things we're trying to refine it before we really start blasting it out there. But we have some cool things coming about, and I'm really excited for the direction we're headed and the amount of value that we'll be able to bring to people. So,
well, very good. I appreciate you sharing with us today, everything you have and all the thoughts about where we're headed with regenerative agriculture. And like you said, we need to look outside of the ag industry to pull in their best practices and adopt them to the ag industry, because we can learn a lot of things from people outside of our space. So, nope, that's great. I appreciate you sharing with us today, Brad, and it's great to catch up. And we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Monty.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks for listening to this conversation today. Monty talked about how Brad got to see soil health practices working in some of the most brittle environments, and how that can often force innovation and finding new ways to make these soil health practices work. There are a lot of factors going on today that may be forcing innovation. So let's keep the conversations and information flowing so we can identify solutions and hone management practices that work in your operation. And to learn more about what we're doing to help growers implement soil health practices, check out our website at asn.farm, and there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.